friends, uh, and a warm welcome to all of you on behalf of IIA Bombay Chapter Women's Circle. We have a small technical glitch, and due to that, you won't be able to see any of the videos. But since everybody is here and Apurva is also here, we will go ahead audio only option. Myself, Nehal Shah, Secretary, IIA Bombay Chapter. Have an eminent and very pleasing personality with us, Apurva Purohit. Welcome, Apurva.
Thank you.
And very sorry about the video not working right now. मैं जैसी हूँ मैं बढ़िया हूँ बस उसके आगे कुछ ना कहना. Yes, our today's topic is Lady, You Are the Boss. With this, we'll hand over to Shivani to a brief introduction of our speaker, Apurva.
Thanks, Nehal. Hello, everyone. I'm happy to introduce Apurva on the call today. To give you a background, Apurva is the president of the Jagran Group, one of India's largest multimedia conglomerates, with over 3 decades of experience in the media and entertainment industry. She currently manages a diverse portfolio, which includes print, radio, digital, and outdoor. She has worked with marquee organizations like Zee, Times of India, and has partnered with private equity players like True North, one of India's oldest PE firms. Over the years, Apurva has won multiple business awards and has been named as one of the most powerful women in business as per the India Today Group and Fortune India. She is also a director on the board of several for-profit and not-for-profit organizations. Apurva is leading voice advocating gender diversity in the Indian business landscape and has authored a national bestseller for working women titled Lady, You Are Not a Man. In her recently launched book titled Lady, You Are the Boss, Apurva aims to empower women and encourage them to achieve their full potential. Drawing from her personal experience, she talks about how women minimize themselves, suffer from the imposter syndrome, and settle for less than they are capable of because of external prejudices as well as misguided internal self-beliefs. Through anecdotes and examples of the book suggests way of overcoming these issues and clear the path towards personal and professional success. Apurva holds a bachelor's degree in science and completed her PGDM from IIM Bangalore. In case during the session you guys have any questions, request you to please put it in the questions section, and towards the end of the session we will be taking those questions with Apurva. Thanks again everyone for joining. Over to you, Apurva. Thank you for joining and for sharing your insights with us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's always my pleasure to talk to professional women. The reason I am so engaged and involved with the cause of ensuring that there are enough women sitting around the boardroom, in organizations, in entrepreneurships, in businesses, is the fact that over the last 30 years of me working, I have seen that there have been so many talented women, so many highly skilled women, but they, because of social pressures, because of family pressures, because of the pressures they put on themselves, they are unable to balance this challenge of being a working professional as well as ensuring that they succeed as a wife and a mother and a daughter and a daughter-in-law. So my effort in all the conversations that I do with women such as yourself has always been to suggest some ideas and leave some thoughts behind with all of you so that you can balance both and you can become successful at everything that you set out to do. The reason I want this is because I see that on the one hand there is so much talent. I also see that organizations are in dire need of more diversity, because the more diverse an organization is, the better their profits are, the better their business results are. It is said that the world's GDP will improve by $28 trillion if women work to their full potential. And I think that's the effort that I keep on wanting to make, so that the world is a better place to live in, a business is a better business, and equally a woman feels fulfilled because she is using all her talents adequately. Now, what happens? And if you go through your own journeys, you will see whether it has happened to you or whether it has happened to some friend of yours or to a sister of yours or a sister-in-law of yours, that women, when they go through the educational journey, when they pass out of their, they do their CA or they do their law or they do their management, they do their engineering, all the women who enter the workforce are extremely charged. And if I talk to anybody at the entry level, all of them will turn around and say, what, if I ask them, so, you know, are you Anjali or Shivani or Hetal, or are you going to work through your entire career? All of them will put up their hands and say, what are you talking? I mean, we've studied so hard, we've passed at the top of our classes, and we've fought with our parents to be educated. And what are you saying? Of course, we will work through the 30, 40 years of our career. But the real fact is that after 5, 6 years of working, half the women who started leave the jobs. Within the first decade of working, half the women who started working leave their jobs. In the next 15 years, 2/3 of the women who have started will leave their job. So that finally at the top, there are less than 5% women left who reach the CXO or the CEO level. And this happens year on year. This happens organization in organization. This happens country to country. So when all of us talk about the glass ceiling and wanting to put in ratios and targets for how many CXO women we should have, the problem is not at the glass ceiling. The real problem is that most of the women have left by the time they reach senior management level. So it is more about the leaky pipeline and less about the glass ceiling. And all the women I talk to talk about the same issues. So what happens in their first 5, 7 years after they've graduated and started working? I mean, the moment a girl becomes 25, 26, there's a lot of pressure on her to get married. The parents start talking about, oh my God, my daughter's 26, she's still not married. Oh my God, my sister's 26 years old and she's not married. And immediately, even in the girl's mind and in her family's mind and everybody who's around her, including her boss, it becomes almost a choice that now she can get married and therefore career will become second priority. Now it's about her career or her family. And then when she gets married, she starts getting feedback from many times a husband, many times a mother-in-law, many times a parents. Ab to shaadi ho gayi hai na, why do you need to work? Now I'm the primary earner, the husband says. Why do you need to work? You stay home and take care of the house. This choice that is given to a girl is a wrong choice. It is a binary choice which only unfortunately we give to our girls, where we say it's either marriage or a career. How come we don't give this binary choice to the husbands, to the boys? Have you in your own organization ever turned around and talked to a young guy who's getting married and said, so what are your plans after you get married? Have we ever asked a guy this question? Think about it. But all the time, anytime one of our girls gets married, the first question is, so what are you thinking after, of what you will do after you get married? So this choice that we leave, or the choice we force her to take, is the first thing that we need to correct. And we need to teach our girls that it is about marriage and career. And you can do both, provided you figure out the mantras of managing, provided there is support that is coming to you from the organization and your family, you can do both. So first message I'm leaving behind with everybody, whether it is in your case or in a case of your colleague or in the case of your sister and daughter, that please never think of it, never socialize her with this feeling that it's either or. She can have both. Just as a guy can have a family and a career, so can a woman. Now let's move to the second step. Where is the second stage that women leave and run away, or are in a sense forced to leave? And that's the stage when they have young children. invariably and constantly and consistently, I see this, that the moment a young girl becomes a mother, the pressure on her is manifold. And I think at this stage, organizations need to go out of their way to support our young girls, because they are going to be the primary caregiver. They are going to be the primary nurturer in the first 2 years of their babies being born. They are going through a lot of physical, psychological changes, and we need to support them at this phase. But having supported them, I think the message for all young mothers is, never think that you need to now leave because you'll not be able to give enough time or care to your child. So many times women walk up to me and say, "Ma'am, I can't bear the guilt of leaving my kid crying at home. When I get up to get ready and go to work, when she's watching me get ready, she says, 'Mama, don't go to work,' and she starts crying, and I can't bear that. And I want to leave my job." So my answer when young women talk to me like this is to say that, do you ever believe that you will get rid of this guilt if you leave your job and sit at home? The reality is no, because you'll just exchange one guilt for another. If you sit at home, you'll feel guilty about not being able to give your child the lifestyle that she wanted because there is only a single income. You'll feel bad that all that education and the sacrifices you made to get that education are going in vain because you're not utilizing that education. You'll feel guilty that uh, you are not financially independent and you're dependent on your husband or your father or your brother. So all you will do is exchange one form of guilt with another. The fact is that we will feel guilty. If we are working and we are leaving kids at home, we will feel guilty. If we stay at home and give up our careers, we will feel guilty. So at this stage, you have to make the choice of which guilt are you willing to live with. And it's not that women such as myself who have worked the entire 32 years of our life, or any other successful woman you see who's made career her primary choice, doesn't feel guilty. I also feel guilty. Any woman CEO you will meet feels guilty about leaving her kids at home. But we made that choice because in the longer term, in the longer run, we believed that we could balance both, and we believed we would be able to contribute much more to our families because we continued to work, because we were happy having a career. And that happiness translated into us being able to share that contentment with our kids. My son is 27 years old now, and he is so proud of what I have done. He is so invested in my career. And he has become, I believe, a more independent, more mature and balanced individual because he has seen that he has had a working mom. And therefore, I also believe that he will thus be a better husband because he understands the concept of equality. So that is the second obstacle that comes in a woman's life. And again, my plea to everybody is not to fall at that stage. Ask for help, utilize the support of your family members, ask for organizational support, but don't give up your career. Finally, when women reach the senior management level, again, there are certain challenges that they face, which makes them almost as if they're wearing an invisibility cloak around them, and they become far more muted, quiet, and not willing to put their hands out when from CXO level or middle management level there is a choice to move up the corporate ladder. Because again, I see at this stage that increasingly there are many senior women in organizations, but very few of them make the cut to CEO. So what is going through a senior woman's mind? Why is she ready to settle to be CHRO or principal but not partner, or partner but not managing partner? What is going through her mind? And here I believe are 2-3 things that are holding her back. And indeed, my second book, Lady or the Boss, is a lot around these themes, that what is holding middle management women back from reaching the top. The couple of things are: one, the tentativeness and the lack of confidence that is there inbuilt in every woman. So in a way, we are all to blame, because the way we bring up our daughters is very different from the way we bring up our sons. We bring up our daughters to be quiet. Don't talk loudly. Don't open your mouth. Don't show your teeth. Sit with your legs crossed. Why are you wearing short clothes? Why are you wearing red lipstick? Constantly, we are minimizing them. Constantly, we are asking them to be silent, to be quiet, to be less noticeable. Whereas we are teaching our sons to be louder than they need to be more vocal, to be feel more entitled, because after all, it is a man's world. Now, to a large extent, we do this because we want to keep our daughters safe. This desire for her to be less noticeable, less visible, less vocal is because we don't want any harm to come. We don't want them to draw attention when they go out in public. But in another way, what we are ultimately doing is we are minimizing and bonsaiing our daughters. We are bringing them up to be quiet, silent, and invisible. And that's how they behave even when they are in organizations. All of you know the McKinsey report, which talks about when equally competent men and women were asked, how many of you think you will reach the top? 78% of the men said they would reach the top. Only 56% of the women said they will reach the top. This is the feeling inside, inbuilt into every woman, because we have brought up our daughters to be lesser than they are. And again, this is something that we have to learn to change about ourselves. That when a new job comes our way, when a tough assignment comes our way, when a promotion is to be sought, how come it's the men who are chasing those roles? How come we are not putting up our hands and saying, I also can deserve to become a partner, I deserve to be move up the next level? Why do we show this lack of confidence? Because the selectors who are sitting on the other side of the interview panel see that you are looking less confident. They don't recognize that it is because of how you have been brought up. They think she is less confident because she's unsure about herself. Whereas the man looks so confident and so sure. It's a fact that he's around 50-60% ready for the next role, but the way he presents himself and projects himself, it's as if he's 150% ready for that role. A woman who's 120% ready for the role will present herself as she's only 60% ready for that role. And this behavior, this body language, this demeanor is something that we need to change. Finally, and just this morning, I was doing another session with Flipkart, and one of the women there asked me, why is it that women are, when I try to be aggressive or when I try to be assertive, I'm seen as aggressive? Why is it that I'm seen as, being very hard-nosed, whereas a man in the same position as me is seen to be a strong leader? So I was telling her that women will always get stereotyped. It's a fact, and there's enough research which says that women either get stereotyped as a iron maiden, or a mother, or a pet, or a seductress. At work, people are very quick to form judgments on women and box them in. Oh, she's so aggressive, and not assertive, so aggressive, just because she's a tough leader. Or look at her, she's reached this position because of her looks. These are the constant stereotyping that the world is doing for us. How do we deal with this? Do we then turn around and say, I don't want to be stereotyped, I'm constantly being criticized, I'm constantly being stared at, so I'm happy to be invisible? or do we turn around and say, I really don't care, because the world will always talk. The world will always have some point of view about women. Invariably, it will be a criticism or a critical point of view. And how many people can we please? How much should we worry about the world saying, oh, either we are too aggressive or we are too soft, either we are too bold or too timorous, either we are working and therefore we don't care about our children, or we are staying at home and we really don't care that the husband is poor fellow slogging. Constantly we are being put in one box or the other. So my answer to her was that beyond a point, you don't need to care. As long as you're a great professional, as long as you see yourself as a woman manager or a woman leader, or as a great manager or a great leader or a great entrepreneur, and not see yourself as a woman manager or a woman leader and behave just as any other professional would behave, don't worry about what the world says. And I think women spend too much time bothered about what is happening around them and what everybody is talking about them. And I tell them, accept that criticism is always going to be a part of life. Accept that judgment is always going to be a part of life, and move on. My final message to all of you is, all our lives, the choices we make are choices that are made for us by our parents, by our in-laws, by our husbands, and we get used to allowing other people to make choices for us. So whether it is when we go out and eat, so often I just keep quiet because my husband is deciding what should be ordered, or my son is deciding what should be ordered. So we allow the muscle of choice to weaken in our mind. And again, we have to take control, as the topic of this discussion is owning your narrative. We have to take control of the choices we make. The small choices of what we will wear, what we will eat, what we will watch on TV, and the large choices of who we will marry, whether we will work or not, how will we work, which organization will we work for. All these choices we have to own and we have to take control of. Only then can we claim to be truly independent. Owning your choice, big and small, making your own decisions without the baggage of expectations of others, or how you have been brought up, or how you have been socialized, is the only way that women will genuinely own 50% of the sky, which is truly theirs. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Apurva, for giving insight to your views and sharing on the subject. Everybody, if you have any questions, you can put it in the question box.
Yeah, Nehal, I will take the questions.
Yeah, okay.
Currently, there are no questions, but I have a question, Apurva.
Yeah.
How one can empower women at workplace, where nowadays, I mean, under current scenario, if you see, there are very few women in senior positions in any corporate you see.
So
you know, even
yes. So that is totally a fact, because that's because many women have stopped working in the beginning itself. So there are only going to be very few women to choose from. No, if there are only 15% women at middle management level, only 5% will move to the top, right?
Right.
So we have to change that. We have to ensure that the leaky pipeline, that the younger women don't leave. And for younger women not to leave, we have to be able to have so many more role models. Now, as you rightly said, there are not so many women. So how do we build role models? My point is that anybody in your own organization who's reached middle management level or senior management level, that woman, you must ask her, and women such as yourselves, you should become role models. You should say, I will stand up and talk to other women and talk about my struggles and talk about my challenges. See, the problem is that when women become senior, they don't want to be seen as a woman leader. They said, I made it on my own, let the other women also slog it. but it is our job, it is our duty to push up other women, and that we can only do by us, be ourselves becoming role models.
Right. We have one more question: how to deal with gender biasness in organization?
See, gender bias, any bias is almost always there. So as I explained, what is a gender bias that you will face? Either there'll be a patriarchal kind of bias. Oh, you can't do this. Oh, you are a woman, I can't give you a late night. Or, oh, you're a woman, I can't give you this tough client to work with. So I think the way we can deal with these biases is by ourselves being strong and by ourselves calling out these biases and saying, why am I not getting this role? I will deal with the tough clients and the tough roles. Many times women take the easy way out. They say, okay, anyway, I have to go home and take care of my housework because I'm doing more of the work than my husband is doing. So it's okay if I'm not given the tough roles. Or they keep on, I can't work on weekends, I can't work after 6 o'clock. So naturally, then they themselves showcase that for them, career is number 2, family is number 1. That is the mentality that women themselves need to get out of. Only then will these biases change.
We have more questions now. Once again, how about a situation whereby management wants more of a classy and modern woman, and a woman who is otherwise very simple and not very presentable but very intelligent is always looked down?
So, you are right. The person who's asking this question is right, because it is a fact that whether it is a man or a woman, the more presentable and better looking and better, more stylish you are, there is a 10% advantage they get, and this is a researched fact. But having said that, I see no reason why we should get bothered or cowed down by this. I mean, if I'm intelligent, if I'm smart and I know my work, then it doesn't matter how I look or how I dress. I mean, all of you have seen Usha Uttup? She sings English music, right? And she sings hardcore. She's been singing in clubs. Now you would imagine that some English music singer in a club, she should be wearing black dresses and high heels. But have you seen her? What does she dress up as? She wears saris with a big bindi. But she's been a huge success now. So you should just be confident. I think what people catch on is not how you look or how you're dressed. It's your confidence or lack of confidence. So present yourself more confidently and you see the change that will come across in people's biases. Confidence is the big driver of how people perceive you, not how you look or not look.
There is one more question from Ms. Nandita Parekh. Work from home phenomenon, is this going to empower women or restrain them even more?
So as of now, what I hear and what all research is telling me is that working from home is actually putting a lot of pressure on women because they are doing double the work, right? They are working,
Right.
also they're taking care of the kids who are at home and the husband who's at home and all. I think this is a great opportunity for us to tell our partners and our families that they also need to contribute. See, what happens is when we go to work, they don't know what we are doing. They have mummy, as someone once told me that it's seen the husband works for the family and the wife works for herself. So her going to work is almost seen as a very selfish reason, right? Whereas the man is going out to earn for the family. Today, you have a choice at work from home to change this narrative by making sure that your family members understand that your work is also important. Your work is also, if you're in a meeting, you can't go out and start cooking for them. So how much are we using this time to teach our family members to share in the household tasks? Unfortunately, we ourselves don't do this. We ourselves don't put pressure on our family to contribute in the house. We say, nahi, hum kar lenge sab kuch.
Apurva, we have a couple of more questions. If you have time, can we go ahead?
We'll take 2 more questions.
Okay. As a woman employee, how should we deal with managers who are rude and disrespectful and don't let us voice our opinion?
So it happens to all women, you've heard of this mansplaining concept. You've heard that the women always get interrupted. Even it happens to me. I'm sitting in a board meeting. I'll start to say something. Immediately I'll get interrupted. If a man is speaking, nobody will interrupt him. So I think the only way to first I used to keep quiet. Now I don't keep quiet. I call it out. I'll say, excuse me, I was talking. You interrupted me. Can I finish what I have to say? And I'm very firm. Again, earlier the mistake I used to make is go into the silence zone. So if I'm not being allowed to speak, or if someone is rude to me, or someone is aggressive to me, I would immediately go in the silence zone. But it didn't serve my purpose, right? They are happy if I go into the silence zone. It gives them more chance to speak. So now I stopped doing that. I call it out. I say, listen, I was speaking. I was making a point. You interrupted me. Or if I've said something and someone else is repeating what I have said, I'll say, but I've already said this. Because many times men do that. They'll take your idea and repeat it as it was their idea with far more confidence. So now I say, the point that Ramesh made, I made it earlier. So I've now learned to be assertive about these things and not allow people to be rude to me.
We'll take one more question. In a country like India, where the work culture in many companies, even evolved ones, encourages employees to work late hours as a routine, versus in the countries, developed countries, is mostly they stick to their usual working timings and respect their boundaries and have a good work-life balance. In such countries, it is much easier for women to continue working. What are your thoughts on this culture?
So it's a fact that I think we in India, we believe that the longer you work, the more hours you put in, the better you are, which is actually not true, right? Because if you are efficient, you can finish it in time. So my answer is that I think we need to educate our bosses. We need to be able to say, okay, yes, I mean, of course, when there is a lot of pressure, I'm willing to work late, but there are some times that I think I will finish. You give me the work now. No, I will finish it in the time that I feel I can finish it in. Just by working, and we have to say this. Okay? Just because 9 o'clock means I'm wasting 2 hours. I can finish the same work by 7 o'clock. As long as we keep on converting the conversation to the work and not the number of hours. But we don't have these conversations, these crucial conversations with our bosses and managers. I remember when I was a management trainee 30 years ago, I was used to stay very far away from work. And you know how Bombay is, you stay somewhere and then you need those 2 days of a weekend to do the household chores and get some time off. So I was very firm. I joined a new organization. I said, and that organization had a culture of Saturday working. So I said, listen, all the work you give me, I will finish Monday to Friday, but I will not come on Saturday. And I kept repeating this, and also showing them at the same time that Monday to Friday, I was far more efficient than anybody else in my organization. So over a period of time, they understood.
And Apurva, what kind of do you think programs we can have in our organization to, support or empower the women? Any specific, any thought you would like to give to our audience who are already at the senior position and maybe at the mid-level currently, so they can push the junior level people up the ladder?
I think very much I would encourage middleman, as I said, middle management and senior management women in this room to be role models themselves. How can you create a environment and a place? It could be through forming a book club. It could be through forming a women's wing. It could be a women's forum. But how can you get women together and through your own stories and challenges teach them how they can manage both? So I think and be more visible for them, be more of mentors to them. So I think mentorship of senior women or junior women is very important. The second bit is, we know that women have suffer from a lack of confidence. So how can we call out the good things they have done. They will never speak about the good things they have done. So can we create things where there are rewards and recognition programs specifically for women? Can we think about that? And finally, I think there is equal training that needs to be done with the men to teach them about some of the subconscious biases that are playing out in their minds. I mean, I was shocked to hear that somebody, I was talking to an HR head, and he was saying, no, I'm very diversity conscious. I have recruited, recently only I recruited 3 diversity and 2 normal. Imagine saying that. I recruited 3 diversity and 2 normal. Means as if, first of all, he's calling women diversity. Then that is abnormal, is it? I wanted to ask him. So this is the subconscious biases that are there in men's minds. We need to do a lot more workshops with men too.
I think that's it. We have a couple of questions, but those I think we have already covered. The similar questions we are getting now. So I would, Apurva, I would like to thank you on behalf of IIA Bombay Chapter Women's Circle. Thanks for giving your precious time, and sorry for the, sorry to the attendees also, and sorry to our eminent speaker on behalf of IIA that we could not, there is a technical glitch and we could not put on the video. New people could not see Apurva. Maybe next time if we have, when we call her for any specific topic, we'll definitely have that resolved. So thanks Apurva. Thanks a lot for giving your time.
Thank you for inviting me. Goodbye. All the best to all of you.